I'm excited to host this beautiful morning Erik Sloane, the Chief Revenue Officer of the Neo Exchange. He's a good friend and a great executive, someone that knows everyone that is everyone at Bay Street, and frankly, throughout the financial circles in Canada. So every time I need to talk to somebody from the financial circles, I say Erik knows them. As a result, we've collaborated a lot together, and I've learned a lot from this gentleman. And I thought, what a great guest to have on the podcast that everyone else can learn a little bit from. So on that note, I will start with a few questions just so that everyone can get to know Erik a little bit more. So Erik, welcome. And tell us a bit about yourself. Who is Erik Sloane?
Thank you, Gary, and pleased to be here and great to catch up as always, and looking forward to seeing you again next week. Who am I? I've been in this industry for a very long time. I think I'm coming up on 20 at some point very shortly. Always had a joy and a passion for finance, for financial markets, but my study and training was in economics. More on the numbers side. I always kind of joke if somebody told me that economics was all algebra and math, may not have done it. Those first couple of years with pictures and charts, those were easy enough to follow along, but very quickly turned into the Greek alphabet for the last couple of years. But always had a passion for computers and technology, and found a real interest in bringing those two things together in current role, and obviously in the effort I've enjoyed with exchanges in Canada over the last 2 decades. Separate from that, I love people. I'm a natural extrovert. Enjoy conversation, meeting people that brings energy to me. On occasion, I like some quiet time on my own, but a few fun hobbies. Always had a passion for extreme sports, wakeboarding, wake surfing, skiing, anything that kind of gives you that energy high or rush. I'm all over it. So, little bit about me.
That is good to know, and in fact, I will get back to those hobbies a bit later in our chat. Erik, I know very well that you are a morning person. Part of the reason why we are doing this podcast at 8 a.m. And tell me a bit about your morning routine. How does Erik become the Energizer Bunny that he is later in the day with that morning routine?
Well, mornings start with a good espresso to start the day, probably 2, before you start staring at anything that could be deemed productive. But coffee for me is a must. It's a non-negotiable object, and if it's a weekend and there's no coffee, it's also problematic. So a good coffee machine, good beans, and a good espresso to start the day, critical for me. I like to spend a few minutes just thinking about all the stuff I need to do, and there's never a shortage. So it's about trimming back on what has to get done, what you committed to people to get done, and what ultimately can wait until later in the day. But as you said, maybe first and foremost, I'm a morning person, so I find mornings for me the most productive window to do some of that really deep thinking, ultimately things that require just brain cells stitched together, detail-oriented work. If that's not done by 9 o'clock, odds are it's not happening today, and it'll be an attempt again tomorrow.
And that explains a lot of the momentum that you have throughout the day. So I appreciate that background. I'm switching gears a little bit, still in the process of getting to know Erik. What is your favorite childhood memory?
Ooh, I've got two good ones there. I never forget one in particular. Summers for me, especially as I was growing up as a kid. I used to get really excited. My family had a place north of the city on the lake, and I distinctly remember always wanting to go out fishing first thing Saturday and Sunday mornings. And my dad, after a long week's worth of work, he's got some of the same traits and ambitions I do. Never hesitated for a moment. 5:30 in the morning, wake up, time to go fishing on the lake and see what we can catch for the day. But think he quickly learned that for me it wasn't so much about the fishing as it was about driving the boat. And so we kind of get settled in, fishing rod in, sorted, worm on the hook. And about 5 minutes later, let's move to this spot. And can I drive? So those for me kind of priceless moments as a kid. Certainly ones that I treasure.
No, and I can really appreciate that, Eric. Great memories, and it makes such a difference. So, listen, becoming the person you are today, there must have been people influencing you. So, if you were to pick up to three people that have really influenced your life, who would they be?
Uh, two are really easy. Family first. My parents having prioritized my well-being, my upbringing, my manners, all the things that I think have spilled into every other area of my life for very different reasons. My mom and her family, Maltese by origin, and ultimately, that real kind of family orientation about them. Your family's number one in life, and give you and do anything they can do to make your life better. She's the emotional, caring, driven one that frankly made sure I got some of these big life moments achieved. Helping with my homework as a kid, made sure I chose a good school and made it to a good university degree program, and just really navigated a lot of those big life decisions where, say, originally was not nearly focused enough on those things. I always had good grades, but choosing where to go was never necessarily my strong suit growing up, and I think many share that similar journey, especially when you're still growing up and figuring out what you want to do. My dad, instilling that work ethic, that drive, and relentless commitment to achieving an end result. It's work hard, and you put the two things together, you get this kind of mix, which I think shows up in pretty well everything I do now, and certainly through my career. But we're putting a third person in that chair. I've spent a lot of time working with our current CEO, and I think Gary, for me, you look at kind of the personal, the professional, and where you sit today, and I've been very fortunate over the years to have had my career shaped, curved, and expanded over almost 20 years now, is a large part as a result of his efforts. So our CEO, Joss, certainly making that third chair for me.
Thank you, Eric. And part of the reason why we do this podcast, we learn a lot about people. And I didn't know about your mother being Maltese. I will use my limited Maltese with you next time I see you. So.
Oh, you're going to do better than I am. I'm a passport and citizenship holder, but regrettably, I know some of the less choice language words in Maltese as a result of just catching up of all the wrong language. So I don't know that I'll be able to converse with you, but I'll bring it back with me.
Eric, I promise I'll get back to your hobbies. So, how do you spend your free time, and what are some of your favorite hobbies?
Depends on the season. We're Canadians at present, despite countries of origin. So that means if you enjoy seasons, this country has a lot on offer. Used to ski a lot. I do enjoy it, and I do plan on getting back to some of that now that we can do so. Skiing for me consumes a lot of time in the winter. Used to play a lot of hockey. Love watching it, but don't get to do it nearly often enough. But the summer holds, I think, two really big passions of mine. One, I love to scuba dive. So that's something that every time I get the chance, traveling, try and work that in, something my wife and I enjoy doing together. We've done some pretty awesome trips just exploring what's beneath the ocean. But that love of water shows up in more convenient ways. Wake surfing has become a huge passion. It's like yoga for 20 minutes while you ride a wave around the lake, and it's a great just kind of separation, disappearance. You focus on the one thing that's in front of you. How do you ride that wave so you don't fall and freeze jumping into the lake? So it's a lot of fun. Those usually kind of get me both ends of the season. Still haven't figured out what to do with fall and spring just yet, but if it means putting on the wetsuit to go surfing, I'm all for it. So.
Well, and doing what you do, I'm sure some of the hobbies that are a bit more intensive are a great way to detach, because sometimes it's hard to switch gears from the day to day.
Oh, you have to focus, right? If there's an area where you can let your brain explore and it doesn't do anything to you, maybe you're not as focused and attentive to what you're doing. So I find something that just, to your point, lets you disconnect, exactly focus on what you're doing for your own health and safety, or otherwise is always a good thing.
Uh, Eric, switching gears again. So, in your role as the Chief Revenue Officer at the Neo Exchange, tell us a bit about what that role looks like and how perhaps it has evolved since the early days that you when you started.
So my Neo 10-year anniversary is actually this April, which is a little scary. It goes by really fast. My role as CRO has been a really exciting evolution over those 10 years, and maybe back us up to the beginning. I started with Neo as our head of product management, so stitching together the exchange technology, working with our vendors to glue together basically the plumbing of the exchange and hand over our trading engine and systems to our broader teams at Neo. It was a monumental learning exercise on how do you bring together a team of almost 100 people to deliver this highly complex technology, infrastructure, software solution, and integrate it with the exchange fabric that already exists in Canada and has for over 150 years. That taught me a lot about working with people, about achieving results, about what makes people happy, keeps them motivated and hungry in a very pressure oriented situation that is delivering on a massive project. And not just for our own team's benefit, but for stakeholders in our business, for people who are expecting us to both meet and exceed expectations. And with the knowledge built in product management around how exchanges work, how they operate, how they integrate, I've managed to take on gradual, successive roles outside of product management in the sales organization, and now running effectively our sales team for the Neo Exchange here in Toronto. What that has culminated in is owning the revenue lines of our core business. It's about trading, it's about market data, and it's about our listings franchise. You can see behind me the screen's getting ready for one of our market opens next week. Both for exchange traded funds, an area where Gary, you and the Alexa team work super closely with us, and the next on corporate listings, the core lifeblood of an exchange. And I think the CRO chair for me has been particularly rewarding, in large part because I also know a lot about how this world comes together. It instills a lot of confidence in our partners, trading firms, data vendors, public company CEOs, and asset managers when we know exactly how shares and money move around between client accounts and their investment management capabilities or investments in public companies. And leading through education on the street, being able to talk confidently about exactly the role of an exchange, how we work, what to do, and make that really easy for a CEO or an ETF manager to follow as a blueprint has been our biggest differentiator, I think, in Canada, because we understand it. And we're happy to bring that information out. With that background developed, try and share that with the team, bring everybody along for the journey, and make sure they all feel as comfortable delivering that exact message out to our clients as possible. That for me has been single biggest rewarding element of the chair today, and a bit of a view on how I got here.
And now only because it's relevant, but before Neo, can you tell us a bit about what you did?
Mm. So Neo was 2013, I guess we started working on the project to build another competing exchange. Before that, we actually built another stock exchange called the Alpha Exchange, which we sold to the TMX back in 2012. I spent 6 or 7 years building that business up from scratch, backed by very different shareholders with a very different purpose. And prior to that, consultant with a large financial services consulting firm, global firm, but had headquarters here in Toronto. And that's a bit how the journey started. But before I knew kind of how this industry worked and what was really interesting, spent a bit of time at one of Canada's banks working for a financial advisor and kind of learned a little bit about sales and sales process and how do you build a book of business. What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? And the one that maybe also due to give some credit for, kind of dating myself a small moment, but that passion for entrepreneurship and building something never really disappears. If it's in you, you've got it, you go. Make you laugh for a moment, kind of early stages of the internet. I think when people used to shop online, they kind of poke around and end up buying stuff in store. Ended up working for this very small startup company at the time. Their whole mission was, how do I take coupons that would otherwise be printed in the paper, post them online? We know people like to shop digitally, or at least they did at the time. How do we bring those discounts, those deals out to people who are looking to buy things in person but want to shop online first and do their comparison shopping? So seen a few different iterations to kind of get me to where I am today, but I can safely tell you not happier anywhere else but here. It's a beautiful spot to be.
Well, and it's been an amazing trajectory, Eric. So, on that note, because of the evolution and how interesting and fast it has been, what would be one or two initiatives you could talk about that within Neo that really contributed to your success?
If I were putting two things on the radar, one, and it's something, Gary, I know you and the team live by. Frankly, it's about helping people. Whether you're helping your teams deliver on an internal project, bringing resources, information, intelligence back to them so that we can make informed decisions as a business, or in current role, helping CEOs or helping clients solve problems in their business, frankly, even if it has nothing to do with ours. That is one element that continues to build that partnership, that trusted advisor element of our business and role, frankly, as a stock exchange. And good news, it's an innate habit for me, sometimes to a fault. I love to help. It is something that I take an enormous amount of pride in and try to do every single day. It's also about doing it well. You can't be everything to everyone. You can't do 1,000 different things in a day. As I was sharing earlier, if something's not done by 9 o'clock, it's going to be really difficult to get to it before lunch, and even harder to pick it up again before you turn off your machine and get some rest. But if you're going to do something, do it to the very best of your capabilities. There's a barrier there. I am a perfectionist, but recognizing the barrier between material value add, kind of that 90-10 rule, starts to show up at some point where decimal precision doesn't matter as much. It's about a bigger outcome and a bigger picture. That's been an acquired taste of mine, something I've had to learn, coming from a very detail-oriented project management and product management capability where comments, periods, decimal places mattered infinitely more than the overall objective at the time. It changes a bit as you grow, and it certainly changes as the size of your organization scales and expands with you.
And I can definitely appreciate that, Eric. And it's you've adapted very well to your changes. uh,
Great partners make it move. It's a lot of fun.
Now, I know none of this is possible without some challenges along the way. So, what are some challenges that you'd like to share that you've encountered along the way, and potentially how you overcame them?
The biggest one, I love love working in Canada and with Canadians. You think about our economy, the way that as kind of an industry, and this applies not only to banking and finance. Look at our telecoms, where we've got a handful of very well established, I'll say monopolies, but oligopolies for the economically inclined, probably the most accurate. Um, there's a handful of very dominant providers in almost every industry in Canada. Every part of your life that you go through personally, you're likely interacting with one of them either by force or by choice. Exchange world, a bit the same. And for us, breaking open that wedge, finding your first mover partners, people who are prepared ultimately to stick their neck out, whether it's their own individual career risk, personal friendships, and professional capabilities to help your business get moving the first time. We get really excited with first movers because you've got a champion, you've got a partner, you've got somebody who is motivated to see both you succeed and hopefully, around your note about good people, also motivated for their own reasons to see their own business grow. And it's not always easy to find those first movers. Sometimes you get part of the spectrum of really big companies, nothing really to gain from working with you. Sometimes you find groups that are a lot smaller than you and frankly need more help from you than you need from them. But in any and either case, it's about being a good partner, a good corporate citizen, helping achieve an objective. And we've been very lucky with the way that we put our organization together. And say luck casually, it can be luck. It often also should be chalked up to a lot of deliberate thinking, discovery, conversations, a lot like this one, where you spend a lot of time getting to know somebody, figure out where there are opportunities to play together and where there's the best mutual and beneficial outcome that you can both work towards and achieve. And it's about being realistic with each other. This actually makes sense to do. We both have something to gain from doing it. Let's go. And finding those first movers, think about an exchange. We're three things: trading all day electronically, market data everywhere, we're listings. But inside each of those groups, there are these almost micro economic or social forces that play, and unique audiences of people you have to get to know, you have to work with, and you have to really enjoy spending time in that space to enhance the relationship and make sure that everything you do is kind of lined up with the objective. And getting each of those pillars of the business moving in a way that everybody's happy with, is symbiotic, and ultimately our role. I don't want to say we're the center of the financial universe. We're the middle point. A lot of things come to us and leave our world, and we rely on good stewards of our business as corporate clients and partners to deliver on their part and frankly make us look good with all of their efforts. So it's a pretty complex little Venn diagram to come to a conclusion on, but finding those first movers has absolutely been the hardest part along the way, and putting some deliberate thought to how you're going to do that, where I think we've been most successful.
And Eric, very, very valuable insight, and I think it'll be beneficial to a lot of our listeners. Along the same lines, uh, considering there will be finance professionals listening to this, what's an important resource that has been very helpful to you throughout your career that you could share with the audience and say, hey, this resource was really helpful, if any?
It's something that we chat a lot about with our public company CEOs. And I'll use the anecdote or the tie-in in proxy to the answer. Being the CEO of a company comes with obviously a lot of expected responsibility, pressure, motivation, drive to deliver ultimately. But no one person is going to make that a complete and outright success, or frankly guarantee it. It's about having sound advisors, trusted counsel, a great team. You're in effect a small army that needs to achieve an objective, be oriented around a goal. I use the CEO position deliberately. They've got their management team, people that work with them to achieve an objective. You've got your CFO, somebody watching your numbers. You've got your chief marketing officer helping you share your journey with the world, attract new customers. You have, look at our business, your chief operating officer, making sure your armies deliver on technology projects or delivery plans, legal teams, really complex kind of inner organization. You've got your board, trusted advisors that are helping you find your blind spots, solve problems, and partners that kind of come together to make it happen. Using the analogy, and Gary, something you and I have spent a ton of time working on together. It's also finding good people that are forward and back of your business or middle lockstep with you to help figure out, reference checks. Who's good people? Who else likes to move in this business? Who likes working with you? That we need to keep close to, because inevitably we all try and achieve the same objective for a client. It all comes down to one thing: success for a company or an ETF or a listing towards the business. And you want to know who's on your team, whether they work with you, for you, or across the street from you. Who is your champion outside the office that is going to help you advance your mission? And also, who's advisor to you? Who are you helping along the way? A bit about knowing who stands to benefit from conversations and what you can achieve together. That for me continues to be probably the most critical thing in our business. That is not just a point in time exercise. It's something that you continuously kind of sit back, take a look. You want to do something different. Who do I need around me to make that happen? You want to do more of the same? Okay. How big is the ecosystem I want to play in? Those kinds of tactical moments right after my espresso in the morning before I start doing actual work during the day, that's really the window I use to kind of think about where else we need to be paying attention.
And Eric, along the same lines, just some productivity tips that you would like to share. What are some tricks or avenues you have engaged throughout your career to be more productive? We heard a bit about the morning routine. Any other tips you'd like to share?
I am an Outlook and Salesforce monster, as you might assume, given the role and the number of touch points and deep relationships we have. Um, got a good memory, I'd like to think, but things need to be memorialized, categorized, and organized in order to make sure that they actually get done. They don't just fall on dead ears afterwards. So for me, especially in current chair, some kind of CRM to manage our relationships or partners or schedules or actions, things that we promise to do for one another and that we actually do them. Important. That's about keeping organized. Outlook, I love folders. I love rules. If I'm, our IT team here probably wants to kill me sometimes. I've got a folder for every company we work with and rules that kind of prioritize and organize my inbox and flag things for me so that my life is more or less sorted and organized the way I want it to be. Got some great help along the way also. You and I think, rely very heavily on our EAs to exist, show up on time to places, and make sure that nobody feels like we haven't been responsive to our efforts. But you, more than most, I think, also know that it's that people connection that makes this work, and you can't replace that. So it just becomes, how do you get time-oriented activities that suck out the energy and effort from everything else you want to do, automated off your plate into somebody else's hands so that you can do what you do best.
And I love all those tips. I hope they'll be helpful to some of the audience. Now, Eric, from a measuring success perspective, obviously financial metrics are important, but what do you look at internally or at a personal level to measure success beyond financial metrics?
So that's one actually I love to chat about because it's a funny one with the role. Why would I care about something else other than dollars showing up
Exactly.
in the bank account? And frankly, maybe shouldn't admit this in open forum, but the revenue is interesting. It's far from the most important element in the day to day, and I say that because at the end of it, being a good partner can often have a much bigger impact than the dollars and cents that show up on a specific client account or customer. For me, looking at the depth and degree of our partnerships is one very critical element of success. Looking at an organization, how many people do we have coverage on? And not just, hey, I met you, we had an email together. It's who do we actually know? That decision maker for our business, critical, obviously, but I think you and I also both know this as career professionals. The decision taker can make some decisions on their own, but if you want to keep that decision flowing in your direction longer term, the people who use your product, who do the research for your product, who are operationally involved with your teams, whether it's lawyers, analysts, if it's ETF teams, if it's people who just need to translate a document and aren't necessarily your client, those are also people that need to be in your orbit. And maybe not yours specifically as the CEO or chief revenue officer of a firm, but certainly somewhere in your sales organization or customer service team or operations team, you need the ability to diversify and deepen those relationships with your most tactical partners. The other thing I love to look at, and Gary, it's something you and I love to do for each other, it's about referrals. This industry, and I didn't really touch on when we were chatting about Canada generally, we're a friendly group of people, but we're a friendly group of people for our friends. That willingness to step out on a ledge, do something new, different, challenging, take a risk. We're a more moderate culture, I would say, as a people. There are elements, don't get me wrong, where we step on a ledge and we have fun, but when we can be connected, introduced with people that we know and trust that are in our orbit, a bit to my point earlier about partners, that for me is the most important element of our business and something we spend a lot of time looking at as an organization. How good's our connectivity with our partners that bring business to us? Are they happy? Are we doing what we need to do? Are there any issues? When was our last touch point? These are all things that we'll take a look at to make sure that we're keeping on top of our partners' needs in the business, not just who's paying the bill.
No, and Eric, as you know, I'm a big fan of the relationship building, and this metrics, well beyond the financial metrics, it is so critical to our overall reputation organizationally, but also how we advance well beyond the dollars in a particular deal, because it's all about over the overall performance, not a single transaction.
Well, it drives change. If you don't talk to people, you are, and I keep laughing about it. The smallest things come up in the most harmless and interesting and sometimes personal conversations. Those small things, hey, if you did this, that would solve a problem for me. Or do you know somebody who can do that because I'm having a ton of issues over here? That is the ambition with anybody and everybody we speak to. Like, where else can we improve and keep improving? And that's what competition does in market and something that I think we both strive to deliver on a daily basis.
And Eric, I always love to work with people from Neo, and there's always a very positive disposition, very congenial. Um, what what tips do you have for building a strong company culture?
Um, the single thing that I think has made the largest difference for us as an organization, it's very easy for everybody to look at somebody like you, somebody like me, who's got a primary responsibility over the revenue line of our organization. In fact, probably the least impactful on that book of business. The people that interact across multiple layers of our business, and Gary, you know probably half of our organization as a result. We're a team of product managers, technology, operations, and lawyers that ultimately make our business move together. But our lawyers are as critical to our sales process as, frankly, the sales team trying to hunt and find new opportunities. So the idea that everybody in the company, no matter how junior, how new, how recently you joined the firm, all the way through middle management up to senior leadership of the company, is ultimately an ambassador of our book of business. The way you speak, the way you share what we do, the way you talk to your friends who may talk to other friends about you, and how you interoperate and work within the company. That philosophy that everybody owns the success of the business longer term, never more critical than especially the early stages of a business being founded, delivered, and kind of scaled up. I make a point once every month or two to remind our operations teams, operational excellence. Can I get to a website and find data? Do we have challenges that we're causing on the street? The fact that we are operationally perfect is the most unrewarding role. Nobody really walks over and applauds you for keeping everything running the way you're supposed to. But it means as salespeople, as stewards of the business, we get to avoid some of those painful conversations where we have to walk into a room and listen to a client say, well, you had these issues last week. Let's talk about those first before we talk about something new and exciting. So operational excellence, team ownership over a goal, and people being motivated and interested to do it. Ultimately, the things that have yielded the best results, the best engagement, and ultimately, I think, a very healthy corporate culture. So you got to take care of people. That's an easy one. Ultimately, everybody has ambitions, dreams, goals. They want to be successful, and success comes in many different forms, fits, and finishes. But being able to understand, navigate, introduce, connect people usually helps satisfy a bunch of those. Firm just doing the right thing by their employees and associates, probably the more critical piece of the book of business.
And I can really appreciate that, Eric. That doesn't change too much. It's almost industry agnostic. So, Eric, one of the things that is critical, especially in the financial industry that's evolving quickly, is how to stay on top of trends in the market. What what do you do to stay on top of trends? What tips do you have for anyone that also, especially in the financial industry, that has to stay on top of those trends?
Finding your sources and well-rounded sources, ultimately a very critical part of the day to day, and actually one of the things that I like to do before the morning starts. You got ebbs and flows, right? Times when you need intelligence and you need to ask for it. Other times where you ultimately need to be reading and keeping up on things. We have a few daily morning newsletters, e-blast, to do a quick sweep on social media for some crazy ideas, things that are moving around, maybe things I want to look into further. A few trusted people in each business unit at different levels in their own mission and achievements. You look at big companies, they're going to care about very different things than small companies as well. And vice versa is also true. Trends, things that might be popping up in other parts of the business might be far more prevalent in small companies. So you got to have a good kind of ear to the ground around your partners, your customers, and those that are front and back of your business to figure out what else is coming. And ultimately, people who are adjacent to but trusted by your client base as advisors. I find that the best way to do it, and we make a point of talking about it. Like, what else is top of mind? Pick up the phone, have a phone call. Hey, I heard this. What's going on? Not being afraid to ask. Sending emails is
And
tough.
the ecosystem is important, right? To staying on top of trends, and I can completely appreciate that. So, Eric, obviously, revenue is critical to the very role that you have within the organization. How do you balance short-term revenue targets versus long-term strategy? Because sometimes they conflict, right? So, the how do you find that balance?
The easiest way, I found, like some things, and this is some of the fun with our business. The exchange is a heavily regulated enterprise. So flexibility on fees and business, frankly, isn't there. Our fee schedules are disclosed. People have to interact with us in that way. That's regulated by the Securities Commission from a fairness, a business perspective. It's a core tenet ultimately of the business. So no side deals, no tide selling, no opportunities really to color outside the lines. The mission in a sales team is ultimately ensuring that we are building a traditional sales funnel. It's about the more connections, the more people, the more partners you work with, the higher the probability something is going to get through that funnel into a qualified state that yields a close. Frankly, it's also about asking where we can help. You'd be amazed at the number of times where we've got a short-term objective, we know something's coming, client hits a delay. Usually the stock response is great, freed up some room, I'll go focus on something else. But taking a moment to just sit there and say, okay, where did you get stuck? And is there anything I can do? And sometimes the answer is yes. I need help navigating this part of my documents, or this is an issue that was brought to my attention. I need to go and address it. And you can say, yeah, that's a real issue. You need some time. Cool. But that why element is probably the most interesting part of the conversation. Sometimes why can lead to we need to move faster in other areas, and maybe that's actually more money for us. The money isn't really the focal point, though. It's really about how do we help? Where is this going to be? Can I do anything to help right now? Connect other partners, bring other people in, and that referral network kind of gets flying from there. We do that a lot. We're putting one other thing on the radar. It's not just helping people 9-4. It's not helping people Monday through Thursday. If we're going to a 4-day work week, which would be interesting in our industry, I think, Gary, much like yours, we roll 24/7. If somebody picks up the phone on Sunday night and says, hey, I've got a deal that needs to get done and we need you guys on the phone, we're there. And that ultimately is what drives that partnership, that business, that helping people out opportunity. So honestly, I think that's probably the most important piece. How can I help?
And Eric, I certainly appreciate that the ability and the need to be Johnny on the spot, frankly, when you're building these partnerships. And you guys do a very good job at it.
Well, you know this too, Gary. That service is the easiest thing to get right. It's also the easiest thing to screw up.
Absolutely.
And one bad service experience, it's no different than a Google page review. If somebody doesn't like you, oftentimes they talk a lot more about the stuff they don't like than, hey, 55 other people have had an absolutely amazing time working with you. You don't often hear those positive reviews. It's the negative stuff that we're always keen to dish out.
You are extremely right, and why we have to be always at our best every time we provide service.
All day.
So, Eric, we're going to the last portion, and these are one-word rapid-fire questions. So just the first thing that comes to mind as we go through it, all right? What is your favorite word? Don't have to overthink it, just whatever comes to mind.
Partner.
I love it. What word do you hate?
It's a hyphenated word. Win-win. Nothing's ever win-win properly. It kills me sometimes. It's too salesy, impersonal. Drives me nuts.
I'll note to myself, never use win-win. What word do you have a hard time pronouncing?
Ooh. I don't know that it's a word, but it's one that I hear frequently. Operationalization. It's something that I'm pretty sure it's not in the dictionary yet. But if the Webster's dictionary is listening, or Oxford, I think they have a habit of adding a word a year. Maybe we can toss that one in next year alongside bling and a few other ones that still don't make sense to me.
I'm really enjoying this. What is your favorite word in another language, if you have one?
Ooh. You got me beat there, Gary. I didn't see that one coming. I have a few words that I would love to share, but for our, especially given your audience, I'm gonna stop short of comments on that one because it's going to get me
perfectly
in trouble.
Fine. Eric, do you speak any other languages?
I used to. My German was actually in phenomenal shape as I was going through high school and early university on account of my exchange program capabilities. But that is something that lapsed about 20 years ago. And sadly, no longer current. So unfortunately, at this time, I am a single language human. I can understand French well enough to get along and converse, but that's about as far as I go for the time being.
Don't worry, that's why we're your partners. You don't. We'll, the language can be we can be bridging that at any given time. So
Oh, don't I know it? We'll put you on every meeting we do, and I'll speak English, and you can throw it into one of 15 different languages for me as needed. I can't wait.
and the final one word answer, Eric. What is one word to describe yourself by?
Personable.
And I very much agree with that.
Gary, this is tough. One word answers for a guy whose ultimate modus operandi is both talk and listen and understand. That's that's a tricky one.
Well, it was by design because it challenges us to distill and distill quickly. That's why they're rapid fire questions. So,
I love it. I love it.
Eric,
Next time we'll have to bring some little pictures and do a Rorschach test.
the now we have our plan for next time.
Come on.
Eric, I really appreciate your time today, and I think this has been great for the audience. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I'd love to, because you're so personal, because you're out there so much, so many people know you. They're like, I want to know more about Eric. I want to learn a bit more, and this is a great way to do it.
Well, Gary, thank you very much for having me. As always, really enjoy the conversation, and looking forward to an in-person espresso soon enough.
And we will arrange that in short order. Thanks again, Eric.